Hi there, my name is Dr. Kate Saxton. I'm a lecturer at Charles Darwin University.
And I'm Hannah. I'm a Bachelor of Social Work student here at CDU.
In today's episode of Being International, we'll be talking about mental health, what it's like to have lived experience of poor mental health, help-seeking opportunities, ways of connecting, and also a bit about what universities might be able to do to support students who are experiencing mental health challenges in their studies.
So before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Larrakia people as the true custodians of the land in which we are recording this podcast today. We extend that welcome to any First Nations community members who might be listening.
We hope you enjoy the podcast.
I am Maria and I've come to Australia from India to study as a foreign international student. Being a foreign student was quite hard and I faced quite a few challenges such as anxiety around my future, unknown worries, and sometimes I felt everything was quite depressing and I couldn't enjoy anything in my life. At that stage, I thought I was the only one who struggled with psychological well-being, but now that I have come across many other students, I realized that I wasn't alone, and a lot of my peers who came on a student visa struggled with their emotional and psychological well-being. In fact, studies conducted by Origin Youth Health Service in Victoria shows that 3 out of 5 international students in Australia experience mental health issues. Results from studies conducted by Origin indicate that mental health issues are highly prevalent among international students due to factors such as isolation from families and culture, language barriers, financial stress, and academic pressure. Sadly, it is evident from studies and other anecdotal evidences that mental health issues have severe consequences on international students and their families, such as chances of dropping out from university studies, financial loss, and loss of other career opportunities. Despite severe mental health concerns, only a very few international students seek help. While international students face several systemic barriers in accessing mental health services such as lack of Medicare services and ineligibility for bulk billing services, these barriers can be compounded by stigma, a lack of culturally appropriate services. In addition, being unsure where to go and not having enough time to seek support have also been identified as barriers to seeking help among international students. As a result, international students have been shown to underutilize support services. In this podcast, Kate and Hannah will talk further about some of these issues. Please be aware that they will be discussing ideas related to suicide, sexuality, and substance abuse, which may be triggering for some listeners. The content in this podcast comes with a language warning and reflects the views of individuals and does not officially represent the views of Charles Darwin University or any of the partner universities such as Australian Catholic University and Queensland University of Technology, who are involved in the student podcast project.
Hi, welcome to Being International podcast. I'm excited to have Hannah with me and also Arnold, the therapy dog, which people might hear panting in the background. Arnold can't introduce himself, but Hannah, you can. Do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah, and I'm a Bachelor of Social Work student here at Charles Darwin University. I'm Indonesian and I'm an international student still, even though I have lived here since 2008. Growing up, I had a plan, or should I say my parents had a plan, and that was for me to study abroad. Studying abroad is a huge privilege, and it's almost like a rite of passage in my family. My dad did it, his dad did it, and it was my turn. So I left 14 years ago at 16. It's almost compulsory to leave your nest and then to return and then to carry the family name. But that isn't my story. My story is still being written, and that's why I'm here.
Excellent. Well, we're looking forward to hearing your story and chatting about your story today. And today, the story, I guess, is within the context of chatting about mental health and also ASD. How would you? How do you want to introduce yourself in terms of that context?
Sure. Okay. I am a proud self-diagnosed autistic woman. I arrived at this knowledge of self about a year ago now. I have spent the last year or so and up until now diving deep into the neurodiversity acceptance movement and identifying and connecting with other people's lived experiences and just expanding my knowledge of self. And yeah, that's what's been going on with me.
Can you tell me about that journey to diagnosis and how that came about for you?
Yeah, it happened through a conversation actually that I had with my friend who is also studying social work with me. We were just talking in the library one day and he was just, he's autistic, so he was talking about autistic, sharing about his experiences, but he was also talking about how autism in women are often overlooked kind of thing. And yeah, we were just having a chat and then I went home that day and then I just couldn't get it out of my head and I picked up the phone and I said, hey, we need to catch up because I need to talk to you about this, Yeah. We had a chat and then from that day I've been on this journey, I guess, just researching everything there is to know about autism. And have you heard of Sarah Hendricks?
No.
Can I talk a bit about her?
Of course. Tell me about that.
So I watched this YouTube clip of her giving a talk about girls and autism. And in that 1.5 hour talk, she shared about her experiences. She was formally diagnosed at 43 years old.
Okay.
And prior to her formal diagnosis, she had written 6 books on autism, gave countless talks on the topic of Asperger and autism. But yeah, she completely flew under the radar all those years because I guess it's harder to pinpoint autism in girls. Hey, like she shared about her struggles with mental health, but she was misdiagnosed because no one saw her as autistic.
Yeah.
And I really identified with that. Some of us women go through life thinking that there is something innately wrong with us, yet we don't know what it is. And that's been my experience. And to listen to her talk, really brought me to my knees. I literally was on the floor crying because for the first time I was identifying with someone else's experience. And I felt less crazy because of it, I identified with the trajectory of her life. I identified with the nuances of her experiences, and I had a moment. I feel like I'm still having a moment. It's a very long moment. But yeah, that kind of put me on this ongoing personal quest to educate myself on the topic of autism. Here I am now, 1 year later, and I'm still on that journey.
It sounds like self-identification has been a really big part. So you've heard your friend talking about his experience and then Sarah discussing about their experience of autism and then, oh my goodness, I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
There's a label for this. I can connect. You talked about some of the nuances. What are the nuances? I mean, I know that people think of ASD and a special interest or things or a certain way of behaving. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, okay. I will just begin by saying this. I love my life, right? I love being part of this living, breathing world. But on the other side of that, I struggle immensely with my mental health. Yeah. I struggle with energy and productivity. I struggle with persistent anxiety. I struggle with using my voice. Some days I'm non-speaking and internal feelings and thoughts take over and I'm just forever stuck in this state of inertia. But yeah, I adore life. I live fully and I love learning. I love it when my brain hooks onto something because because I'll make sure I'll learn everything there is to know about said topic, you know. I'm obsessed with people, but at the same time, they confuse me. People confuse me, and learning about theories in this degree have really helped me understand human behavior and by extension myself. I'm beginning to understand myself and my humanity now, and I've stopped seeing myself as this divine entity who's meant to suffer, because I'm not meant to suffer. I'm meant to thrive. All humans are meant to thrive, but that's just not the reality of the world we live in, is it? Yeah.
For many people, there is challenge and struggle, and particularly people who identify as neurodiverse or have mental health challenges. I guess I do want to acknowledge I was going to say the word bravery in terms of coming to speak about your experiences, but I also I think that's an interesting social narrative that we say, oh, you're talking about mental health, you're so brave, as though it's something we shouldn't be talking about. Or I don't know, what are your thoughts about why people are so nervous and scared, or we just don't talk about mental health?
Talking about mental health is scary because there is still so much stigma around it. People who have mental health challenges are stereotyped as sick, disordered. I know I've been called too much, too sensitive, insane,
intense.
Dangerous, intense. I love intense though.
I love
intense. Yeah. And there's also this general assumption that you have to be well to participate in society, and to be anything other than that means you're a failure. I think that has detrimental impact on people from collectivist cultures, because it stops us from reaching out. Obviously, I don't speak on behalf of all cultures. I am just sharing about my personal experience with cultural expectations and how that looks in my world. It has been my experience that when your identity is tied to the collective, things like family or religion, you don't have much room for expression. And I feel like that's a breeding ground for shame. So, my shame thickened. It had layers upon layers upon layers, and that really affected my quality of life and my mental health, really.
I will just point out, because there's weird snuffling and groaning in the background, and that's Arnold, the dog. He's a Neapolitan Mastiff. So if anyone is bored on a Friday afternoon, Googling Neapolitan Mastiff puppies is one of my favourite self-care activities.
He's beautiful.
He's pretty
Arnold
sweet.
is beautiful.
He's pretty sweet. So, Hannah, thinking about your cultural positioning and being part of a collective, and also the relationship between identity and your own cultural upbringing, what about, I guess, the ways in which culture impacts on help-seeking behaviour? Do you have any thoughts about that? I guess from your perspective as coming from Indonesia.
Yeah. So I think my relationship with shame began in 2013 when I told my parents that I like girls. I was 21 at the time, and I was living in Melbourne. My parents living in Jakarta. They had a rough time dealing with my coming out. Mum especially. We're a traditional Indonesian family. We're pretty religious. We observe Christianity as a family, when I came out, it was a pretty traumatic time, not just for me, but for my parents as well. But in my world, I felt rejected. I felt unwanted. I was isolated, and I internalized a lot. And that internalization of shame led me down some dark paths. And I started to believe that I was the source of all my troubles. And that really put me in a self-perpetuating cycle of misery.
So this idea that I'm responsible for this, I've somehow caused this.
Absolutely.
This is my lot in life.
It's my doing.
So how does that impact on help seeking?
It stalled it. I think for 4 years I was trying to figure out how to ask for help. You know, I couldn't use my words, so I did it the best way I knew how. I used my body. I had to make that pain real, so I self-destructed through heavy drug use. I was grappling with my mental health, and I had a really expensive drug habit. You know, I was selling my stuff, stealing money from family members. I wasn't sleeping. I lived on a steady diet of cereal and meth. You know, for 4 years, I roamed the world. I was in Jakarta. Then out of nowhere, I was back in Melbourne using ice in some dirty shed. Then I was detoxing on a boat off some island in Indonesia. Out of nowhere, I was back in my family home picking fights with my sisters because I was in so much pain. I slept in my car because the thought of going home is just so shameful. You know, I went to America for 3 weeks and I lost everything. I lost all my stuff in New York on day 3 because I got way too drunk at an Irish pub. I remember being carried out by this big African-American man, the bouncer, I'm assuming, and I don't remember anything, but I remember waking up in my apartment and it was snowing. It was so beautiful, but I was just crying. You know, I was just crying. I was a party girl, and in my head, I lived up to that name. I knew how to play that role well. My grandma took me to Singapore, and I detoxed in a hotel room for 7 days. Then I flew back to Melbourne, and I went straight to my dealer's house. I was in a toxic and abusive relationship, and I couldn't tell anyone about it again because I was ashamed. Like, how do you tell your mom and dad that are overseas that your first ever girlfriend is treating you really badly? Where do I even begin, you know? Like, I was just constantly escaping myself. It was Groundhog Day every day. At the core of it, I felt misunderstood, but I guess I didn't have the language or the awareness of how the social context, how the discourse of religion, family, and culture was negatively affecting my life. I think I was literally dying of shame. Yeah.
So, Hannah, it sounds like that was a really dark place for you and a really difficult place for you. And yet I'm looking at you sitting across the other side of the desk from me now, and you're, you know, full of life and energy and, you know, committed to your studies, committed to social justice, being an advocate. How were you able to, I guess, access support? What was that process like?
Accessing support, that was really, really hard in my experience. You know, cultural stigma was a big one that really stopped me from reaching out. You know, and being an international student, you know, the limitations that come with our international student status. Yes, I have an overseas student health care, but that doesn't cover mental health. Treatments, and let me tell you, mental health, they're expensive.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the road to get to that treatment is long and windy, and it's hard to navigate.
Yeah.
And it just becomes one of those things that, you know, it's too hard, therefore I will just go through the motions and kind of bear with it.
So you reached out for help, or you recognised that you wanted to reach out for help, and even though there's huge barriers for anyone wanting to access mental health support, but then being an international student, there's a whole nother layer around cultural stigma and financial barriers, can't access services, you're not covered on Medicare, blah, 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 blah. But I do know from your story, from, you know, knowing you for a while, that you were able to go to rehab at some point, and a big part of where you are now is because of that experience. Do you want to talk a bit about that, about what that was like?
Yeah, so I went to rehab in 2016. You know, I was in an abusive relationship for the whole time. I was in active addiction, and I finally had enough. And I decided to check myself into rehab, and I thought I just wanted to rest, you know. I just needed a rest.
Yeah.
So I checked myself into an intensive rehab in Bacchus Marsh. and ended up staying for 6 months. Then I spent another 12 months in a halfway house in Moonee Ponds. So I guess the only time I engaged with formal services was in rehab. So I was seeing psychologists, all those formal things.
Yeah.
Yeah. But separate from that, I kind of had to forge my own path. And I guess I found recovery through conversations and community. I was deep into 12 steps at the start of my recovery because I needed it. I needed the program, I needed the structure, but more than anything, I needed the people. So I will say this, the barrier in accessing support was and will always be the system, but I think the facilitator were the humans that I met along the way. 1 or 2 did let me down, but 10 others loved me back to life. And I think that's what it is. It's collective care. We have the power, not the system. The system doesn't give you power because you already have the power. You just kind of have to harness it.
So it sounds like throughout your story there's these moments of connecting with others, having conversations, identifying with people who are like you, finding people who are safe to talk about these things. And it's human connectedness that sort of got you through, and yet, in those, I guess for many people who struggle with mental health and or addiction or, even who are neurodiverse, isolation can tend to be a part of those characteristics and patterns of behaviour. So it's almost like, this self-perpetuating situation where you're like, don't talk to me, but actually please come and help me and love me and I need you, but also leave me alone. What about how did you get through university when all of this was going on? How did mental health impact your study journey?
I have been studying since 2008. I came to Australia specifically to study. That's my legal status. I'm an international student, and to be honest, I'm so sick of, I just want to be a human. I don't want to be an international student. I just want to be a human.
Just want to be Hannah.
Yeah, just want to be Hannah.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. It's my legal status, so it looms over my head, and it's annoying, but it's my journey, and I'm allowing myself grace. I'm almost at the end of my study now, finally. So fingers crossed, I will say goodbye to that status soon.
Yeah.
But in terms of how mental health impacted my study journey,
because you didn't start out in social work, did you?
No, not at all. Fresh out of high school, I decided to study industrial design because they accepted me. So I thought I was going to be a designer, But I don't know, what was I going to do with that degree, no shade to designers, obviously. But I don't know. That's just,
It wasn't the right fit for you.
It definitely wasn't the right fit for me. But it feels different now. It feels right, studying social work. I am less focused on getting that PR. Of course I am, I'd be lying if I'm not. But I'm just living and trying to learn and absorb everything there is to know about social work, because I feel like my lived experiences have led me here, and that's meaningful for me. Kate, at the start of placement, you shared that Michelle Newcomb's article with us, the one about childhood adversity and how people with lived experiences of trauma often feel called to this profession. It's funny because I feel like that's, I couldn't explain why I wanted to do social work. I feel called, and that sounds a bit cringe, me saying that. I don't know. I feel, oh my God, I'm sorry. I feel cringe, but I feel called, and I feel so humbled to be in this place because it feels right. It feels right, and I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's I have this conversation with lots of other students or practitioners about why they wanted to do social work, and some people it was a deliberate choice and some people just sort of fell into it. But for most people, there's an alignment between lived experience,
Yeah.
but also values.
Yeah.
So wanting communities to be better, more inclusive,
Yeah.
more safe, more welcoming, nurturing, and also recognising that there's so many injustices which can make people feel like they don't belong, they're not important, we're not listening, we don't care. So Hannah, you've talked about, I guess, the power of needing to belong and that the role that human interaction plays, and whether that's either feeling disconnected and shamed and isolated and cut off and the negative consequences of that, or whether it be the incredible power of connection and identification and support, people power. For those people who might be listening and are just starting to think about their own story and their own mental health stories and how they may identify or not identify, I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about your own mental health journey in terms of when you first started to think maybe there's something going on here for me, or what I'm happening doesn't seem to be what's happening for Bill and Bob and Ted and Sally over there.
So I think I felt different from the moment I was able to form memories. I didn't feel different because how would I know I was different? I felt intense. That's how I would describe my state of being intense. In preschool, I remember watching other kids intently, not joining in, just from afar. I didn't know how to ask for turns and would just stand next to the swing, assuming the person would hop off. This one time I got kicked on the face by this boy because of it. And I remember being in pain. I remember holding my face and feeling hot on my face, but being unsure of how to ask the teachers or the adults for help. I remember meltdowns in the principal's office because the driver was late to pick me up. I remember having anxiety about napping and sleeping. I was never tired, so I didn't understand why I had to sleep.
When they have nap time in...
And that would give me so much anxiety. So in protest, I would make myself vomit in bed. I didn't know how to communicate what I needed or what I was feeling, but I did so through behavior. And I've just always remembered, I don't know, just feeling intense, you know? And when primary school started, my routine changed and it was tough. I didn't play outside with the other kids before the school bell started, and I would just sit at the table and draw. Sometimes other kids would come and watch me, and I didn't mind that. Like, I didn't mind being around people. I love writing stories. I would write about families going on holidays, kids playing with their kites on the field, brothers and sisters going on random adventures, anything really. I had a pretty active imagination, and I was pretty content despite my lack of participation in social activities. I was a quiet child, and I would sit with my nanny during recess. We had nannies back in Jakarta. I don't know, did you have a nanny growing up?
I did have a nanny actually for some of my
well, there you go.
experience. I think it's different in the Australian context. It seems to be quite often just for elite sort of. Whereas I know lots of other international colleagues or friends who. It was normal to have a nanny or a
like
family
an extended
member.
External family. Anyways. I was a quiet child, and I would just sit with my nanny during recess. You know, I don't know, just sit with her. She'd feed me, whatever. And one day, Mum came to school to bribe all my friends and told them to play with me. I didn't tell her to do that. I never told her I was lonely or that I needed friends. But I guess she made an assumption. She meant well, but something happened to me that day, you know. I remember watching her from afar, and I felt horrible. I felt like I just let her down or something. It wasn't a good feeling.
So is it like you're doing things by yourself, or you're quite content because you're writing stories, you're being creative, you're around other people, but you don't necessarily crave that same sort of interaction that maybe
I don't. Yeah.
parents think their kids should have.
Yeah.
Or you must be sad because you're not playing with the hula hoop or whatever, but you weren't in that space at all. It was someone else thinking.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. I don't know. So something happened, and I don't know. I think from that day onwards, I started to focus on achievement. I focused on what I was good at, and that was basketball. My privilege allowed me to be surrounded by people and opportunities. And, if I was good at something, I made sure I became the best at it. The actual school bored me to death.
Yep.
I couldn't stand school.
Yep.
But basketball got me through my schooling years in Indonesia, all the way until I left for Melbourne in 2008. And I thank God every day for my special interests for sustaining me all those years.
It's interesting because sometimes there is a lot of labels and misunderstandings about autism and autism spectrum disorder, ASD. And one of that is this idea of, hyperfixation or special interests, like, I don't know, you watch trains obsessively, or you collect every single Star Wars character or whatever you're special interested in. But it's also, it can be a really powerful, I guess, like a superhuman trait. Like that's the thing that gets you through life, and you know that better than anyone else knows it, and you excel in it and you kick butt at it.
Yeah.
And for you, whether it be basketball, whether it be, I know you're really interested in like insects and animals and things like that.
I'm bug crazy.
So, I think it's good to kind of challenge that narrative, I guess. It's not this is a label, this is a thing that you have that makes you maybe be considered autistic, or actually this is this thing that you have that makes you able to achieve and be so competent. And what else, I guess, is it like for you growing up with ASD? And
I guess in terms of feeling different, I have felt different my whole life. And that's based on my observations, but also based on how others have treated me in the past. I have been labeled as awkward, too emotional, shy, and I take that on board. I internalized all those words, and I don't know, kind of projected them onto myself. And I once read that the shame of being shamed can only be undone by the self. And I guess I'm still on that journey of undoing.
Okay.
I still struggle today. I feel like professionally, especially, I really struggle professionally. I think there's this notion as well that you should separate your personal and professional.
Yeah.
And that's still a point of tension for me. It's still very new. I don't know. I constantly feel like an imposter at work. I feel like I'm pretending. I don't love my job, but I don't know, maybe that's also my cue to leave. I don't know. My point is I really struggle professionally. I don't know how to conduct myself professionally.
And I think there is a pressure to be a certain way, but also in my experience of working in a Western context and then in cross-cultural contexts, or even with First Nations communities, it's in a Western setting, there's this idea that, okay, well, between 9 to 5, you're this person, and then you go home and you be someone else. Whereas for most of us in real life, we are who we are all the time, and you can't, or you can, but the pressure to have to be of a different sexual identity or personal trait or different value base during your 9 to 5 job is a huge amount of pressure and almost quite strange, I guess. It's like we're just robots in the workplace instead of being able to be authentic. And I think that's what, for at least as in social work, I know that's what we talk about, creating spaces for people to be authentic. What what does that look like in universities, I guess? So how can universities let you be authentic and safe spaces for you?
I think more than anything, universities need to be prepared to accept students' challenges at face value. Especially us international students, we juggle so many things.
You have been able to overcome, and I guess you're constantly navigating challenges and moving through them. What are some of the strategies? And Arnold's snoring in the background. It's not you. You're not boring, Hannah. It's just Arnold's needs a rest. So what strategies do you draw from to kind of get through the day-to-day and to get through uni? And
I'm a trial and error type of girl. So despite my mental health challenges, I'm quite the eternal optimist, I want to say. My survival instinct always kicks in, and I'm grateful for that. I'm still healing, from past experiences, but the difference today is that I am in control of my own narrative. That also means letting go of untrue beliefs I have about myself. Things like I am weak, I am inadequate, I am shy, I will cry, I am dumb. That's a big one for me. And I feel like I've learned that conversation is the tool that deconstructs hindering messages from society. So I go out there now and I practice using my voice. It's not always easy, and sometimes I fail, just like our recording session last week. But it doesn't mean I stop trying. And, another big thing is finding and connecting with my community of people.
Yeah.
Finding other self-diagnosed autistics who are thriving despite the challenges of living in a neurotypical world. Reading and learning from other autistics who are disrupting the academic space, being mindful of where I get my information from. And also switching off is a big one, because I don't switch off. I'm kind of like a sponge and I just absorb everything. So I feel like that's a big part of my professional development, switching off. But yeah, it's a struggle. It's hard when your brain is wired for information and tasks. But it is what it is, and I manage. Yeah.
And you manage amazingly well, Hannah, and certainly for someone who shares about finding their voice, I hope that you do feel, it sounds as though you are finding your voice, and your voice is very powerful and your message is really powerful, and I certainly value your time today and sharing and your honesty. Do you have any suggestions for, so for example, I'm a university lecturer. Do you have any suggestions for university staff or education providers about how they can best support students who have different mental health challenges?
University in general, I think it's time to review your formal processes and shake things up a bit, because maybe it's a bit oppressive.
Maybe it's a bit oppressive. In what way is it a bit oppressive?
Oh, put me on the spot, Kate. I don't know, just like putting like what we talked about earlier, kind of assuming that everyone is at the same level, performing at the same level, and how there's such a...
Or maybe it's around not recognising that some people have barriers that other people don't have. So some people have more or less financial resources than others. Some people have barriers because of their ethnicity. Well, you
said it better than I did.
So what do you want to say? What would you want to say to go for it?
Lecturers, facilitators, educators, it's on you. So be prepared to take students' challenges at face value. If someone needs an adjustment, then give them one. Why is that so hard? We are constantly talking about advocacy in this degree. Well, stand with us, practice what you preach, show us how it's done, And on that note, Kate, I can't thank you enough for believing in me and for exposing me to all these different ways of doing, knowing, and becoming, and sending me to all these public events. This learning has been so meaningful for me. I feel heard. I feel in charge of my own learning. I choose what I want to do. You have this approachable demeanor about you, and you listen, and you've advocated for us, you've walked with us. And honestly, like, I've never met an educator like you. I feel excited about the future. I feel certain that I'm on the right path, and this is a brand new feeling for me. Like, mental health will always be a struggle of mine, but that's okay, you know. I will never be sane, and that's okay. Yeah, I love your passion for education, and I feel so inspired by your tenacity, and I think you have the biggest heart, and I know for a fact that many of us CDU students feel the same way. So yeah, I feel extremely grateful to have the opportunity to work closely with you this year. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Make me want to cry, Hannah. I haven't even paid you to say that. I think, and thank you for saying, I don't know if I'll ever be sane, because you know, one of the sayings I say to my student is normal is a setting on a washing machine. There's no such thing as normal. And I guess in terms of your message to universities and you know, the staff that work in them are also part of some challenging structures.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is around looking for ways to accept diversity, looking for ways to encourage difference and flexibility, and moving beyond the kind of one size fits all, because it's not working for a lot of people.
No, it's not.
No. Well, thank you for your time and your energy, and your story. And is there anything else that you would want to say to anyone listening, or particularly culturally and linguistically diverse students that might be tuning in?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of us are not sure about how or when to speak, and I think that belief stops us from going out there to seek help. And I just want you to know that you are not alone, and you are going to have to be brave and talk to a few people before things get better. But that's just exactly what you need to do. You don't need to think about anything else other than just to reach out. And I promise that there are people out there that will help you. And yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Arnold.
Thanks, Arnold. Did we do okay?
If this podcast has raised any issues for you, please contact your University Counselling Support Service or Lifeline on 131114.